we've talked about, so far we've talked about us as an individual and leading and some of the things we can do. I think the 4 questions, and I think writing your own manifesto are enormously powerful and easily accessible things right in this moment for anybody listening to this. At the same time, many of us are still working in organizational systems that are deeply challenged to figure out how to respond in this moment. And you've been doing some seminal work with some very powerful CEOs and examples of where they've used purpose in really, really challenging situations. Maybe not exactly the same as this moment, but the 2008 recession gave a lot of people an opportunity to find out what their true mettle was, but also what is the organizational purpose and why does it matter? Because we could say right this minute, who cares about organizational purpose? Let's just keep everybody's jobs and keep everybody healthy. But my sense is that you have a point of view as to why organizational purpose might actually be more important now than it ever has been. So I'd like to give you a chance to talk about how do you see organizational purpose in this interesting time?
Okay. Let me hit one point before we jump to the purpose. It's kind of a midpoint, because you said, a lot of people are concerned with organization and others are saying, well, at this point in time, why would I care? I think there's an answer to that question for everyone. And that is, right now, you and I are having a conversation. I would not describe it as an ordinary conversation. I describe it as a great conversation. Why do I say that? When this conversation's over, because of the wonderful questions you've asked, the wonderful comments you've made, I'm learning things in this conversation. And they're really important things. I'll jot down some notes about some of those things. Now, that is a metaphor for the point I want to make. In every conversation that every human being has today, they have an opportunity to create accelerated learning, to create a conversation, a relationship that's rich and abundant. Now, most of the time we don't, but we have the potential to do it. And if we have a higher purpose, the likelihood of us doing it is much greater. So what we're doing when we're living in purpose is we're creating culture everywhere. So if we're talking to our child, we're creating a relationship in which their learning and development can be accelerated. My learning and development can be accelerated. If I'm talking to my spouse, I have the opportunity to create greatness in marriage. I can live in mediocrity or even in pain, or I could create greatness. So whether we're talking about a conversation with someone, a lasting relationship, or a team, or a complete large organization, it's all the same. Yeah. If I'm bringing purpose to human relationship, I'm creating a better world. At that point, I really am a leader, and it has nothing to do with position.
Beautiful. Yeah, no, I think in some ways, everybody likes to see everything as separate. And I think what I'm saying is look, the unique gift is a unique gift. And one of my views about organizational purpose has been, if it's on the wall, it's not an organizational purpose. If it's coming through you and it shows up and people say, well, that's the purpose, then who created it is you, not the wall, right?
Yeah,
so that's where it lives.
Yeah, that's exactly right. In the book, that's one of our crucial points. In the book, we talk about conventional economic theory which we value. We in no way criticize it. We simply say this theory can be enlarged, and when it is, it becomes more powerful. So economic theory basically says people are self-interested, rational actors. Resources are scarce, conflict is inevitable. In hierarchies, communication is filtered, learning is dampened, and the story goes on. Those are all core assumptions of social science. They're very gloomy assumptions, but they're real because they're based on how we behave most of the time.
Kind of the opposite of the fundamental state of leadership. But
Exactly,
yeah,
exactly right, exactly right.
Where you came up with the model, you said, what would be the antithesis to what that describes?
That's exactly right, because in the middle of the normal curve is where we live. That's the comfort zone, and that's what it looks like. And the social scientists have nailed the middle of the curve and the left side of the curve, all the problems that come out of that. What they never look at is the right side of the curve. The right side of the curve is what I call social excellence. It's what comes out of discovering you write your own story, right? And so we can embrace that social excellence. And when we do, it enlarges our economic theory. Now, why do I say that? Because the other still exists. And I have the opportunity to lift people from the middle of the curve to the right side of the curve. I'm inspiring them to learn in an accelerated rate in rich relationships. And my organization's going to take off. And so the first 6 chapters of the book are about that process. The remaining 8 chapters say there are 8 steps that you can follow to create a purpose-driven organization. And each step is counterintuitive. And the steps sound very simple. The first step is envision the inspired workforce, the purpose-driven workforce. And we said, well, I could do that. The answer is no, we don't do that. Every day, I go into meetings with my colleagues and we look at a problem and we formulate policies, solutions to the problem. In the process, we are assuming exactly what the economists assume. There's out there a bunch of self-interested, rational actors fighting over resources. We can't trust them, so we've got to put this control system in place. That happens every minute of every day in every organization, and it's based on those middle of the curve assumptions. And the question is, what does a great workforce look like?
You know, this happened in LA at a hospital last week where a bunch of nurses decided they were going to create a space outside to handle people coming in and make sure that there was social distancing and all the pieces with protocols to be taken care of. And a senior executive came down and told them that the rules said that they couldn't do this.
Yeah, always.
Well, when I sat in there, as I was reading the article, I was thinking of that actual element of the model and going, oh, this is where these 2 parts crash into each other.
That's
right?
beautiful.
The urgency of the opportunity of the moment with the guy who's wanting to follow the rules about, you know, what you can't use the line for, you know, all these reasons, and the stupidity of the rule, right?
That story, Nick, captures the essence of the issue. That is, excellence is deviance from the norm, right?
By definition, it has to be.
By definition.
Right.
That means it will always threaten the status quo. The status quo is sometimes manifest in rules, the existing hierarchical rules. They will always be against social excellence, right? If they're not in the rules, they're in the culture. When someone deviates in a positive direction, it makes us as uncomfortable as when they deviate in a negative direction.
Now you have an example that I saw. There was a guy that I saw, we did a gathering together, who was from Detroit, right? who ran the electrical system there that was bankrupt or close to bankrupt.
Right, right.
So tell me a little bit about him, because I think he was an amazing example of being a deviant.
He was an extraordinary example, and I just love the story. His name's Jerry Anderson. Jerry is trained in the hard sciences and then in finance. He was kind of a tough guy. He went to Bain Consulting, then he went to DTE, and he
DTE
solved
is Detroit.
a DTE Energy
Okay.
is the name of the company. And so they're a utility company and more, but they provide electric and gas in Michigan. So he was your classic administrative thinker. All the assumptions were assumptions he was acting out. At one point, he said, I received the engagement scores for the company. He was still in the middle at this point. And he said, I looked at those numbers and said, these numbers suck. The company was in the bottom decile. He said, these are terrible numbers. And then he took the report, threw it in the garbage and said, no, I don't care, not my job. Then he got promoted to president, and it was his job. And his solution was a middle of the curve solution. He came up with rational policy processes to improve engagement, and they went up 2%. He said, but the problem was, I also knew everyone was furious with me. And this moment I changed my back, they were going to turn my back, they were going to go back, right? It wasn't working. And then 2008 hit. He said within a week or two, we were millions and millions of dollars behind. Everything was turned upside down. We did an analysis. Well, my smartest people said, we're a high fixed cost company. The only thing we can do is downsize. And it threw him into a second crisis. He said, I just went through this company and told everybody they were a human being. And now, if we do this, we lose them forever.
Yeah.
I said, okay, smart guy, what do you want to do? And he said, I had no idea what to do. I just knew this pain. And then he did something really out of the box and outside his own comfort zone. He was in a large meeting with people at the top, and he said, look, here's the truth. Here are all the numbers, just as they appear. No varnish. This is reality. And there's this truth. I don't know what to do. I'm the CEO. I don't know what to do. Now, you never hear that. It's not allowed. And then he said to them, but I do believe you know what to do. And I'm not even smart enough to ask you the right question. Only you know. And what I'm hoping is that you'll do it. And he said he went back to his office with a huge knot in his stomach and said, what did I just do?
Yes.
A month later, the finance guy came in. He said, okay, how are we doing? And the guy said, oh, we're ahead of plan. He said, that can't be right. Your model's broken. He said, no, my model works. Each month, had a plan. August comes. It was a cool August. That means not much money. He knew they were in big trouble. He said, how are we doing? And they said, had a plan. And Jerry slammed the table. He said, your model is broken. Go fix it. And the guy slammed the table and said, no, my model's not broken. This is exactly where we are. And Jerry said that moment, that instant, his life changed. And the next 12 months were the most educational months of his life. He had to go figure out, because at this very moment, GM is going bankrupt.
Right.
The city of Detroit is falling apart. The state of Michigan is crumbling. The rest of the country is crumbling. And they're ahead of plan, way ahead of plan. In fact, by the end of the year, they would have the best year in their history. That's not possible. So he had to go figure out, why is this working? And he made a discovery few people ever make about nature. Those people were going out and leading the company. They were taking initiative on their own. And he tells the story about the one group that had this computer contract for $30 million. That's a big outlay. So they looked at it twice, reduced it to 27. Once Jerry held the meeting, they went back, looked at it all over again, and reduced it to $3 million. Totally reframed what was needed. $27 million savings. He said that was happening all over the company, hundreds of examples. I didn't even know what was going on. Now, isn't that interesting? The CEO doesn't know what's going on as people all over the company are taking initiatives and saving the company. That's emergence. That's not top-down direction. That's emergent action. We can't see emergent action, but it's a part of nature. Now, Jerry comes out of that learning, and he says it's the 12 most educational months of his life because he then has so many events once he understands that. He goes to USAA Insurance, meets with Joe Roble, who's on his board. He sees what they're doing, and he comes out and says, I can't understand. Look at these call centers. These people are happy, they're engaged, they're productive. That's not my call centers. And Roble said, Jerry, the highest purpose of a leader is to help the people understand the purpose.
Mm.
That was a stunning sentence. No one believes that. They came back and they began to work on their purpose and on their message, started to work. At the end of that year, Jerry brings his people together and says, this has been miraculous, but now I want to ask a question. Now, I call this the question that changes everything. Few leaders will ever be in a place to even ask this question, but it's the question that changes everything. The question is, if crisis can create social excellence without leadership, can leadership create social excellence without crisis? That's the profound question. Only after you've learned this lesson can you ask that question. So most executives will never ask that question. But Jerry asked the question because his direct reports had been through 2009. They saw that miracle. They believed. Because most CEOs, if they ask that question, they get nodded heads and everybody walks out of the room and just resists. They believed. So they formulated a vision based on that notion that they could create social excellence as leaders. From that time to this time, DTE has performed at 300% the industry average on all the financial numbers. They've become a best place to work. Utilities do not become best places to work. It's an extraordinary story. But it's really a typical story of what happens when you go through the transformation. You learn to live in the fundamental state of leadership, and then you learn to create social excellence, what happens on the right side of the curve. Most companies, like the example you gave, like that hospital, can't create it because the minute some nurses get a vision, some administrator crushes it, right? Because he can't see it. So that's the essence of the story.
Our time is coming to a close, but what I want to do is, I don't know. I always find our conversations to be so. What's the fundamental state of leadership? I think you pulled me into that fundamental state of leadership where we have these conversations. I think we both go that place, and then at the end we're like, okay, so we got to continue this conversation. I would say that I think that this is installment one of a conversation we should have that I think others might benefit. I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for the willingness to participate in my journey and in the journey of everybody listening as we step into that fundamental state of leadership and purpose for each of ourselves in a time where we get to rewrite our story, and we get to leverage both leading in crisis at the same time to create something that hasn't existed before. So thank you.
Well, I want to thank you for something. By traveling the path you've traveled and understanding the things you've come to understand, every time you talk with me, you engage me in a great conversation. And what that means is I'm going to leave this conversation a better person than I was coming into it. And that's because of who you are. And so it's an absolute privilege to talk to you, my friend.
Thank you.